A lot of weird things can happen when you work in a retail store. You can ask anyone who's worked retail for a while, and they will have some stories. My daughter worked at a popular clothing store for a while here in Florida. She worked mostly around the fitting rooms, and she was constantly amazed and annoyed at the things people would do in those little rooms where you try on clothes. Oh yeah, some people would just leave the place a big mess. There were other customers who just took it a step further. And whatever you're imagining right now, you're probably correct. But what if you're working in a retail environment, just a regular day, and you turn around and see a man with a gun pointed at you? How do you think you would react? Jen knows exactly what she would do, because that's exactly what happened to her one day at work. Jen told this story on the podcast more than 3 years ago, which means this is a flashback episode. After you hear her story, I'll play a brief conversation I had with Jen just recently about what's going on with her these days.
Real people in unreal situations.
The eerie silence when I walked in, and he's just staring at me.
I was like, hello, like, are you okay? And then I had to tell him it was me.
There was just blood everywhere.
They're shouting, they're screaming, they're being hit by bullets, they're hitting the ground.
And in that moment, I literally thought, this is how I die.
Everything changed then.
And I just thought to myself, this isn't happening.
Every single story deserves to be heard.
I'm Scott Johnson, and this is What Was That Like? When this happened, what kind of store was it? Where were you working?
It was a women's clothing store.
And as I understand, there had been a string of robberies for some time prior to this.
Yes. I'll tell you a little bit about how the robbery started. February, there was this string of robberies. They were happening about 20 miles north of where my store was located, and they were mostly women-owned stores, so clothing stores, nail salons, things of that nature. The store I worked at was a chain store, so some of our locations 20 miles north of me were hit by this robber. He did come in, ask for money, and it was reported, but at that time, he was not caught. So what happened is our company had a conference call to go over the steps and what we should and shouldn't do if we're involved in an armed robbery. And I remember a couple specific things. One was speak as little as possible. Move as little as possible because you don't want to startle the robber. So I heard that and I remember thinking, okay, that's interesting tips and conversation, but I'll never need to use it, right? So the robbery stopped for about a month and a half. And then all of a sudden, a women's clothing store had gotten hit again.
It just seems like it's such a weird target to go for, a women's clothing store. I mean, you wouldn't think there's a lot of cash, but I guess it's an easy target, easy victims. You think that was the logic behind it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it was, even though there wasn't a lot of cash, there was less risk involved, and he already hit 12 stores. So I guess when you start adding up the money, it probably is substantial. Yeah, I do think that that's why he chose to go with the women clothing stores. So a month and a half later, he starts up again. So my district manager comes to visit. She is my boss because I am store manager. She asks, "Do you feel safe?" I said yes, because the robberies again were 20 miles north of my store. That seemed to be his pattern. So she went on her way. 4 days later, it's a Saturday, 7 p.m., still light outside. We're in a strip center. So there are lots of stores that are next to me. Plus, there was a movie theater not far away, hotel. So it was a very busy area. I am in the fitting room section, which is in the middle of our store. I have about 4 people that I am helping. And it's a ladies' clothing store. It was close to Easter. Women are looking for dresses. I'm having fun like I always do. And I'm standing there, and behind me, I hear, "Give me your money." And I kind of just stopped, and your mind is registering those words like I didn't really hear that right. So then I hear, "Give me your money." I turned around. I see a gun pointed at me close enough I could touch it. I see a man in a mask, and then my eyes go back to the gun. At that point, I turn and I start to head towards the register. I could see out of the corner of my eye him wave the gun at the other people in the store. There was about 9 others for them to head to the register to follow me. So I remember I got to the first register. I'm standing behind it. He has the other customers lined up in front of me, in front of the registers. He asked for their money, for their wallet, cash, anything that they had. I remember I took the money out of the till. And so as to not speak, I took my hands and I kind of spread it across the coins. That was my way of asking, "Do you want the coins as well?" And he shook his head no.
I've got to ask you this question. It seems like a lot of people in a situation like this would have been just panicked, but you're not only not panicked, but you were thinking back to that conference call where they told you don't speak much. So you pointed to the coins instead of asking him if he wanted the coins. How panicked were you at that point?
At that point, honestly, I had a couple of things going through my head. As I'm walking to the register, and my mind is going on, how long has he been watching me? To know that I was the person he had to come to. Had it been an hour? Had it been hours? Had it been days? Had it been weeks? Because generally they'll case a store before they just walk in. So that is going through my mind as I'm walking to the register. And then at the register, I wasn't panicking. But what I heard was the customers, there was praying. In fact, one of the customers shushed the other customer because they were praying out loud and they didn't want to hear any noise. So I'm watching this unfold. I clean out the other register. And at that point, I knew from history that that's all he wanted. So he looks at the back of the store where our back door was. And he asked me, "What is that?" I said, "Well, that goes to our back room, the office, and storage." He was like, "I want you to go back there." I'm thinking in my mind, okay, this is not normal. I'm thinking he has our money. So at this point, what else does he want? You're right. There are several people in this store. I had an out-of-body experience. I have children, but in that moment, I wasn't their mom. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't an aunt. I became nobody so that I could be somebody for these people. I became their mom. I became very protective of them, these people who I may not have even spoken to, or I may have spoken to them for 5 minutes. It didn't matter. So as to protect them, and this is the point whenever I went to court that I would start to cry, but I ushered them to go in front of me because not knowing his intentions, if he was going to shoot somebody, because mind you, he's still pointing a gun at us, right? If he was going to shoot somebody, I wanted that person to be me. The customers are making their way because you have to go around a corner. So to understand, when you go through the back door on the right is the men and women's bathroom. drinking fountains. As you go straight, you go left around a corner, and right there is where our back door is. And he asked me if it was locked. And I told him it should be, and if you push on it, an alarm will go off. He asked me, "Do you have a safe?" I said, "No, we don't." We get to the back, so we go around the corner, and now where my desk is and where there's storage. He asks again, "Do you have a safe?" And I said, "No, we don't." And I'm getting concerned because in my mind, I know I'm telling the truth. But what if he doesn't believe me? What if he thinks I'm lying or trying to hide something? All of these things are going through my mind. It's kind of crazy. I get to the back. The other customers are lined up in front of my desk. At that point, he has me pull the phone out of the wall, and he asks for our cell phones. I watch the customers give up their most prized possession. You know, our phones are like our diary. They have photos. They have everything very personal to them. I still had my phone in my pocket, and I had on black pants that day, and I had an Android phone. I'll never forget it. I love that phone. Without him asking, we had another room back there, and I instinctually knew he was going to put us in that room. I also knew my phone in my pocket, the outline of it, when I had to turn to walk to go into that room, he was going to notice it. Reluctantly, I gave him my phone. Because understand, that phone was the only phone that we could potentially have left to call for help because I had to pull the other phone out of the wall. So I gave him my phone to not risk it being found hidden in my pocket. I was right. He asked what that room is. I told him it's storage. There's hangers in there and fixtures. Sure enough, he tells us to get in there. It is semi-dark. There's no windows in that room. We are lined up against the back wall. There are boxes of hangers. So I remember, like, if you sit on a box of hangers, there's an indentation because it's not a solid thing to sit on. And I remember kind of leaning up against that and the indentation and the feeling, the form of the hangers on my bottom and my legs. At this point, I have crying. I have praying. I have people stunned. And the robber looks at me and he says, "Does this door lock?" I had no idea because we had never shut that door. He asked me again, "Does this door lock?" Now, mind you, I already told him no to a safe, and I know that was the wrong answer. And I felt like I was answering him wrong again. And the last thing I wanted to do was to irritate him, right? But I didn't know. So he looked at us and he said, "Don't say a word and no one will get hurt." Nobody said a word. He goes over to the door and he looks at us one more time, the gun pointed at us. "Don't say a word and no one will get hurt." He pulls the door shut. And I'll never forget that sound because he had to pull it hard because the door had never been shut. So it needed to be worked in, I guess you could say. At that moment, I have crying. I have others trying to console others. I have praying. And then I have a lady who I will never forget because I was helping her, the fitting room. She had the most beautiful eyes. Her eyes were just this beautiful brown. And I remember them. She started to have a panic attack back there, which was then elevating the anxiety in the room. I go over to her. I remember putting my arms on her upper arms, pushing her up against the wall, looking in her eyes. and saying, baby, I need you to stay with me. I need you to stay with me. It's going to be okay. Look at me. And she tried, but the panic was just taking over, and I could slowly feel her body. I couldn't hold it up any longer. I looked at one of the other customers and I said, I need you to come here. I said, I can't hold her up and I don't want her to fall. So he comes over and he helps me to get her down to the ground. At this point, she is now having a major medical issue beyond a panic attack. Watching her, when you asked me, when did I panic? That is the moment panic started to set in. I know how to put on a Band-Aid. I don't know how to do anything beyond that. I don't watch ER. I don't watch any of those shows, and that's just not for me. So the other people in the room are trying to give their suggestions on what we should do, but something inside was like, no, that's not right. That's not what we're supposed to do. Fortunately, my coworker was able to hide her phone. I was so thankful. Before she called, I could hear the doorbell go off. That signaled somebody had left or somebody had come in. I'm thinking the robber left, right? And I'm like, okay, that's good. I don't know for sure, but that is potentially good. A couple seconds later, I hear the doorbell go off again. I'm like, that's not good. I don't know if anybody else in the room heard the bell. I'm thinking they probably didn't, so they didn't understand what could be going on in this situation. I told my coworker, I said, get behind me. I said, I need you to call 911. In my mind, I had her get behind me because if the robber had come back and he opened that door, I didn't want him to see her on the phone. So she called. They answered quickly, and we're on our way. Meanwhile, this lady is getting worse. And in my mind, I'm swallowing down panic. And I'm going, if anything happens to her, I'm not going to be okay. Because, I was in this mom mode and you're ultra protective. I asked my coworker for her phone. I said, I need to call again. I said, you stay behind me. Because again, I heard the 2 doorbells, so chances were likely that there was somebody else in the store. I call, they immediately answer, and I was like, listen, I need your help. I was like, I have this lady with a medical emergency, and I don't know what to do. The lady on the phone was wonderful. She walked me through some steps that I could take to get her stabilized, at least until help would arrive. She stayed on the phone with me, and her voice and her instructions was what I needed in that moment. It took some responsibility off me because I was in overdrive, the adrenaline, because I still hear crying. It's still semi-dark. All of my senses, I don't know how I didn't panic because it was just sensory overload for sure.
We definitely got to give credit to the 911 operators of the world because they have the ability to stay calm in virtually any situation. Pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And I needed that, and I needed the direction. And they said, just stay on the phone with us. And just knowing that somebody was there was reassuring as well. I will never forget the moment that door was shoved open. It made the same sound as when it was closed. My initial thought for a second was, oh my God, it's the robber. He's back. But then I saw it was our police officers, our law enforcement. The sigh of relief, it was like everybody took a deep breath in that room. And it was, the feeling I had inside was so thankful. It was great to have somebody on the phone helping me. But when you have that live person there, it makes such a difference. And really through the whole thing, you, without realizing it, your safety is slowly being unraveled. Your sense of being safe. And the moment the police officers opened the door, I could feel it stop unraveling. It was amazing, just their presence, how it impacted the situation and how it impacted me. At that point, help had arrived for the lady. The other customers were ushered out of the room, and I remember they were all situated in the shoe department because the police officers needed to get their information for anything further that they needed. The officer looked at me and he said, "You look rather calm for everything you've just been through." And I told him, I said, "Give me a few hours and I won't be." I said, "Right now I need a cigarette." So I no longer smoke, but back then I did. And I probably could have just smoked a whole pack, to be honest with you. But I came back in and I could see outside the yellow tape, police line do not cross. And I could see the blue lights flashing. And it was unreal because I saw that stuff in the movies and on TV. But now I'm actually witnessing it right outside my store.
Your place of employment where you go to work every day, it's now a crime scene. That's got to be pretty surreal.
It really was. And the magnitude didn't even really hit me in that moment. It's like everything is just a scene. Somebody had asked me how long the incident lasted. And I said, in those situations, it's not about time. It's about events. It's about the sequence of the way things happened. So honestly, I don't know how long it was, but I can tell you step by step what was going on. So I called my district manager. I called my parents. And then I started to work with the police and giving them the details of everything that had happened. I called a girlfriend who came and picked me up, and I was going to stay with her for the night. As probably about an hour into helping the police officers, I could feel the adrenaline start to dissipate. I could feel my body wanting to shake, my legs getting very weak, starting to set in. I could not drive anywhere. I was not capable. So my girlfriend picked me up. We went home and we drank, because that's what you do when you're going through traumatic things, is you want to numb it and you want to forget it. Next morning, I remember she drove me back to the store. And again, I met the detective and other law enforcement officers. We walked through the steps again because I really didn't sleep. In fact, I had sunglasses on when I met them because my eyes were red and puffy. And quite honestly, they were unrecognizable. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't even recognize myself. Everything was just crazy. So I was back at the store helping them any way that I could. I had an immense need to give them information, to be there with them, whatever they needed.
Did they get a statement from you the day before? Or did they say, okay, go ahead, take care of yourself, come back tomorrow and we'll get a full statement, more details?
No, they will get a statement right away because everything is still fresh in your mind and the adrenaline was still there. So no, I gave them as much information as I could possibly remember. But you're right in asking that, because as time went on, then the little details I started to remember them. And I was really amazed, honestly, when you're in high stress situations, what you remember. Because I remember customers from earlier that day. I remember what they were wearing. It was interesting. So I learned that we take in way more in our environment than we actually realize.
Yeah, it's just being able to access it afterwards. Sometimes that's the tough part. But you were able to pull up a bunch of details, though, huh?
I was. And obviously, I still can. Even though I've told my story more often, I'm amazed at what I still remember. As victims turn survivors, you never forget. You never forget. You might not realize it as much, But I know as I tell my story, it gets a little bit easier. But yeah, you never forget, and it will forever affect your life, to be honest with you.
Did your company give you time off work after this?
Mm-hmm. I was given 10 days off. I lived by myself. So I had someone come and stay with me. And odd things happened. I guess you could say my sense of safety was not broken. It was shattered, completely shattered. I didn't feel safe anywhere. So I had someone stay with me, and I don't know why, but I could not go in my bedroom. I would not sleep in there. I got out the few things that I needed, and that was it. I don't know why I would not go in there. I had 2 cats who didn't like strangers. So I got to where, number one, I put a sliver of paper in the door jamb on the bottom. So if I came home and that paper was on the ground, I knew somebody had been in my home. I also knew if my cats weren't there that somebody was in the house, because they were always there to greet me. So now you're probably wondering maybe why I'm taking so many safety precautions. And I didn't mention this before, but it's very important. Is other than my cell phone, he also had taken my wallet. And I didn't realize that right away. So my wallet had my current address. So now the robbers had my wallet and my cell phone, and I'm supposed to be living by myself, right? They never found my personal items. So it's floating around out there. It was very scary. So yes, within my 10 days, like you said, I did have the 10 days off. The first week I spent pretty much every day with the detectives or at the police department. About 24 hours after the robbery, I get a phone call at night or early in the morning. I'm talking like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I get a phone call from one of the police officers, or it might have been the detective, to say we got him. And I was so relieved.
I guess they knew that you wouldn't mind getting a phone call at 1 a.m. with that kind of news.
No. In fact, my first question was, does he have my phone and my wallet? And they were like, no, ma'am, we weren't able to recover that. Well, in the process of the investigation, I had told them that on my phone, I had an app called Where's My Droid, which is a cell phone locator. So at one point, they had used that app, and that is what had led them to about 20 miles north in the area where the other robberies had occurred, and they found him there at a bar having a good time.
So he must have had your phone with him at that time then.
Yes. He never got rid of it, which is good and bad. As a robber, I don't know why you would keep someone's cell phone knowing that technology is very advanced. You can find all kinds of things using your phone. No, he kept it.
Why weren't they able to get your phone back then if he had it at that time?
I don't know. I never asked that question. That actually is a really good question. And in that moment, I didn't think of that. I think I was so relieved that they got him. But that's a really good question, and I don't have the answer to that.
Yeah, technology is advanced, but the IQ of a criminal isn't necessarily quite as advanced.
You are exactly right about that. So I was dealing with these triggers at home, feeling very unsafe. But I decided that I needed to see my family also within this time frame. They lived a couple hours north of where I did, my brother and my sister. And I arranged to also make sure that my children were there Fortunately, they were staying the night at a friend's house at the time that, all of this happened. My kids, they always had play guns. I didn't have a problem with guns. I still don't have a problem with guns, to be honest with you. I grew up in very much a hunting home, so I was familiar with guns, hunter safety, all of that other stuff. But I told my children, you can't bring your guns. I was like, I can't see them. They're airsoft guns, whatever it was. Went up to my family's house, and usually we would play cards, have a good time. But all I could do was sit there on the couch. And I remember just playing Angry Birds on my phone because at that point I had gotten a new phone. I remember behind me hearing my sister-in-law say, I don't know what to do for her. She's just sitting there. And I find that one of the challenges for victims is their family, because they don't know what to do. They want to help you, but they don't know what to do because, quite frankly, the victim doesn't know what they need. Their world is so turned upside that they, I guess, just being quiet and being distracted by this electronic game was all I could handle at this time. I needed their presence. So I think it's really important that families know that presence, just the presence, is important. And we don't necessarily need you to fix anything in that moment. But I remember that was kind of hard for them because I wasn't the normal Jen that they were used to, and they didn't know how to handle it. But we made it through it. It's okay. In the meantime, after the robber, they caught the driver as well. I had never seen the driver, but I ended up having to go to jury trial for him. I had never been in front of a jury. I had never been in a courtroom, nothing. And for me, that was a shocking, traumatic situation.
What was traumatic about being in the courtroom?
All I knew was what you see on TV. But I had to, you get up on this stand, you have 10 strangers looking at you, listening to your words. You have someone looking at you in the courtroom who I've never seen. They just wanted to know the trauma as an accomplice, what he had done to me. But what also I didn't realize is that when I went into the courtroom, his family was there. His friends were there. All of a sudden, a new fear set in of, oh my gosh, they know what I look like. They know what I drive. They could follow me home. So that was really tough because even if I started to get a sliver of feeling safe back, it was now gone again. And this new fear came in that I had to deal with. And I asked the law enforcement, I said, what if they follow me home? And they're like, the chances of that happening is very slim. It's just not something they tend to do. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I didn't think I'd get robbed either. So, I wasn't trying to beat the odds or anything like that. So that was really interesting. That was a whole new step to this process. I start therapy. Mind you, this is still going within the 10 days. I start therapy. And that was very helpful. I don't remember a lot of my conversation with him, but I've always been an advocate of therapy anyway. I think if you deal with people, you need therapy. It's really helpful in building relationships and learning how to cope with things because we're all different. My 10 days are up and I was expected back to work. My therapist said, no, you are not ready. But I told him, I said, I have to go. I have to try because I am one of those people where I don't stop halfway down a road and wonder what if the rest of my life. I have to go to the stop sign and know. So I went back to work. It was very weird to walk in, especially into the back room. I kind of stood there and it was like light bulbs going off, different triggers of just things I remember standing in front of my desk, the phone that was pulled out of the wall, hearing that door be pulled shut that had never been shut before. I would not go into the room with the hangers where we were left. I wouldn't go in there, and I never did. I remember we had a conference call led by my district manager, and she asked me how I was. I said, I don't think I'm okay. And she said, well, you're going to have to figure it out because this is the busiest time of the year. I understood that because it was business. She still has a business to run and numbers to make and all of these other things. What was really hard for me is I was a very accomplished manager. I was successful. I had a huge impact on the district, numbers and performance, things of that nature. It was fun. I was a media spokesperson for the local market, so I really enjoyed that. So as I'm sitting here having this conversation with my district manager and admitting that maybe I can't do this or maybe I can't do it right now, brought about feelings of inadequacy, weakness. I felt like I just saved these people's lives and you're just going to discard me. So all of it, now it's a new feeling that I'm trying to process as well.
Yeah, it sounds like your work performance was almost a big part of your identity, and now you seem to be losing that as well. That's got to be pretty tough.
You're exactly right about that. It was very much a part of my identity. I thrived at my job. I enjoyed working with people, training, development. I was only with the company a couple of months, and then they gave me my own store. I got credit card signups like no other, really known for that. I would teach classes on it over conference calls. So it was very much my identity, very much my success, my title, all of those things. So I get up from the desk after my conference call, and I go to head out to the sales floor. All of these thoughts going through my mind. I can feel myself kind of anxiety trying to set in, right? I start to come out of the back room and I stop because there's a man right there. I about burst into tears. My assistant manager came over. I grabbed her arm. She was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No." I said, "This is what happens to me." And the gentleman is apologizing to me. And I was like, "No," I was like, "It's not you, it's me." You know, that famous relationship line, if it was ever true in my life, it was in that moment. And I felt so bad and I was embarrassed, and come to find out he actually was our security guard, that they had reinstilled that service into our store. I told my assistant manager, I said, "I can't do this." I said, I know now I definitely cannot do this. I called my district manager and I told her what happened, and I said, "I'm really sorry." I was like, "But I can't do this." And I could hear the disappointment in her voice, which was really hard to hear because it reinstilled the disappointment that I felt in myself. And why can't you be strong enough? Why can't you just get over this? You're fine. Everybody lived, move on. But it doesn't work that way. I continued to go to therapy. I was on workman's comp for, I believe it was 6 weeks. Mind you, it's just me. So I can't be without work. I have bills to pay. So now I'm without a job. I'm going to therapy. I'm on workman's comp, which is not 100% pay. And I have to find a way to find another job. In the process, the robber, now I have to go to court for him. I tell you, I had a stack of subpoenas. I must have had about 25 of them. Because for me, being the main witness, you had to go for motions. You had to go for pretrial. I had to be there for all of these things. Even if it was just to sit on the bench, I had to be present. So trying to find a new job, I had to automatically explain, listen, there are times when I can't come to work because I'm not given notice. I'm given like the night before, okay, we need you in court at 9 a.m. So it made it challenging because a lot of, especially in retail, a lot of individuals don't understand that process because, again, they're focused on business. I went in front of a jury again for the robber. Every time back then, it was so hard. I just cried. I just cried and told my story. He ended up being sentenced to jail. I don't remember how long. There's facts that you're aware, but you don't really care about because you're really just trying to forget this. And yet I'm being dragged back into court again and again. And now I have to see him again. And you just want it to go away. So I knew he was sent to jail. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, that's fine. I was starting to feel safe again and work through all of those feelings. I ended up finding another job, which was good. It was a little bit further away in my same field. So that worked out fine. About 2 years later, when I thought this was all over and I thought I had dealt with the emotional trauma, I had moved a couple hours north, so I wasn't even in the same area, kind of wanting to start over, right? I get a phone call. I'll never forget where I was standing. The phone call comes through and it's, we need you to come to federal court. And I told the lady, I said, I can't. I said, I can't. And I started to cry and she was like, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to come. Everything came flooding back and all I could do was cry. I went home. It was about a month later that court date was scheduled. It was an hour and a half away. So I drove there. And I remember this was the first time that all of us had been together. All of us victims were in this room.
So everybody in the store that was in the store at the time was attending this court session?
Yes, we were all called into federal court. But it was a very serious situation because he had multiple robberies in multiple counties. So this was not that anything is simple, but this was not just one store in one county. Like there were several things involved and this was not his first crime.
So what was it like seeing all those people again, the people that you had been through this traumatic experience with?
Actually, I was thankful to see them because the one thing that I thought of all the time is I wanted to thank them. I wanted to thank them for trusting me to not react. One of them could have wanted to be a hero. Anything could have happened in that scenario when you're dealing with that many people. And I looked at them and I just said, thank you. And I was so thankful for that opportunity. And then they went around the room and they wanted to compensate us for our mileage and whatnot. The lady came to me and I just started to cry. And I said, ma'am, I just want you to leave me alone. I said, I don't want your money. I said, I don't want anything. I just want you to leave me alone. And that was hard because I was the only one crying there amongst the other victims turned survivors. This courtroom was very different. It was much darker. There were more people. It was bigger. I remember walking down the aisle and getting in my little box. I had the judge, once I was sitting, I had the judge on my left and I had the robber right in front of me. He had on glasses now. And the jury was also on my left. I started to be asked questions and I asked for Kleenex because I just cried. And I remember that Kleenex ended up being a ball almost disintegrating in my hand because I tried to wipe up the tears and they finally brought me some water to speak so I could speak as well. The toughest thing about that is they tried to tear apart my character. And as soon as they started to do that, the person who was assigned to defend us stood up and said, no, we're not going to do this. That's not fair. So it was stopped, and I'm really glad. What a victim goes through, there were times, and I'm just going to be honest, but there were times where I wish I didn't know the robber. I wish I didn't see him. I wish all of those things, because going to court was harder than I think going through the whole incident. The incident lasted, let's just say, minutes. But court now, I'm up to 2 years.
You keep ripping open the same wound.
Exactly. And I had to see him. I don't want to see him. I finish day 1 of being in front of the jury. I don't remember what happened, but I had to come back again. Drove back the next morning, and I got on the stand, and again I was asked more questions. Finally, the judge looks at me and he says, "Is there anything else you would like to say or ask?" And I looked at him and I said, "Sir, do I ever have to come back?" And he said, "No, ma'am, you don't." And I looked at him and I said, "Thank you." And I walked out that courtroom, never to return. No, I have not returned, and I hope I never have to be in a courtroom again. I do want to say this because court was really tough, and that is absolutely how I felt in that moment. But I would do it again, because there are many who live with they didn't catch him. What is he going to do next? He already went from just taking money and leaving to now abducting people. So what would be next? So for me, I at least got closure knowing that I helped to put him away, because I've talked to other people where they never got caught, and then they live with wondering, what else has he done?
I've heard you say that you had thoughts after this of what could have happened, and that was kind of what haunted you. How it could have gone worse. Why do you think that those kind of thoughts came into your head?
That's a really good question. And I've had conversations, because some people look at it as what could have they have done different to change the outcome. I don't think there's anything that I could have done different, but there are things that could have went wrong. One of the other victims could have tried to be a hero. When we went into the back room, we passed the bathrooms, and what if he took me in there and raped me? What if he shot me? I put myself in a position where those things could have happened. And I already knew that this was not his normal behavior from the prior robberies. Those things haunted me, those questions. So that was what was challenging for me, because when you're in those situations, you just don't know. Everything is a series of events. I'm fortunate that none of that did happen.
It's been several years since this took place. Mm-hmm. And prior to our conversation here, I was doing some research, and I found the robber's mugshot, and I sent it to you asking, is this the guy? And you had not seen his face in years. Mm-hmm. What went through your head when you saw him again?
Honestly, the same thing right now is I don't have a problem getting information. I think it's important, but no, I hadn't seen his face in, 10 years. And so I think it really shocked me that when I did, I kind of like now, except I definitely cried. It triggered something that I thought I had perhaps worked through. And it made me realize that I hadn't, but that's okay, because I don't have to look at his face, often. I did it for research purposes, and I would do it again, absolutely. But yeah, I have chills now. Yeah, the reaction surprised me. Maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't.
If someone listening to this conversation has a family or a friend who's been through something like what you went through, What's the best thing for them to do or to say to help that person?
That's a really good question because honestly, as a victim, we don't really know ourselves. And I think that's part of the frustration, but maybe even sadness for family members is because we don't want to see someone else hurting. There's a natural instinct to help, right? If you see somebody has a cut, you want to put a Band-Aid on it. You want to help with the healing process. But for me, I didn't even know what I needed. I just knew that I needed them around me because I felt safe and I knew they loved me. So presence, I think just the presence is all that somebody really needs in the beginning. And if they want to talk, they'll talk. And with you being there, they know that you're there to listen if that's what you need.
It seems that this experience has kind of spawned a new adventure for you, and that is your own podcast.
I believe everything happens for a reason. And I've often asked myself, why did this happen to me? But I think now it's come into light via my podcast, I Need Blue. It is a victim turned survivor advocate show based upon real stories such as mine, but on any topic. It's not just limited to robberies. And there is sensitive information, so I always make sure that people are aware of that as well. I wanted a place for victims turned survivors to share their stories, to share their fears, their tears, their joys, their accomplishments, where they are today, what they did to get there. I think it's really important because when you realize you're not alone, it makes the healing process easier. In turn, as you heard me say, one of the most memorable, thankful moments of that experience was when the police officers pushed that door open. I will never forget that moment instilled a little bit of the safety, that feeling of being safe in me that had been lost. And I'll never forget that. And they were there through the whole process and helping me, having to go back to the scene and helping them with whatever they needed. They were very sensitive to my needs, emotionally, physically, whatever, as a victim. So they were very patient and empathetic and helpful. And I really feel that that side of what they do needs to be told because not everybody goes through this experience. And until you do, you don't understand and you don't appreciate it. So thank you to them.
And that's why you named the podcast I Need Blue, blue indicating law enforcement. And so where can people find this show? Do you have a website?
I do. It's www.ineedblue.net. ineedblue.net.
And if people like hearing the story that you just told, you're going to have some similar stories on that. And I know my audience loves hearing firsthand true stories.
Absolutely. I just launched my 5th episode this morning. So really excited about that. And if any of your listeners have a story they want to share, absolutely contact me because I want to help you. I'm a platform for you to share your story to help others.
And we'll have links to all of that in the show notes for this episode. And Jen, thanks again.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for helping me share my story.
Jen, thanks for coming back on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Scott. It's an honor.
Yeah, I know we see each other every once in a while, but you've had some stuff going on. After you were on the podcast, you came out with your book called Why I Survived. And just by reading that title, I'm sure people would think, oh, of course, it's the story she just told, Why I Survived, that armed robbery. But there's more to it than that, right? You've been through some other trauma.
Yes, the book actually is 4 different stories of mine. And the first story is I survived dating abuse. And that is not something that I had publicly shared, to be honest with you. It was from having guests on who had the courage to share their survival stories of dating abuse or domestic violence, I was like, you know what? I'm going to put it out there. This is something I had started to write about a decade ago because it ended in 2006. But at one point, like I think it was 8 years ago, I literally ripped it all up thinking I would heal.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
That's got to be a regret, having written that. Or how much did you have written at that point?
Oh, pretty much the whole thing, because I chronologically wrote it basically month for month. In the new book, though, the story is still written pretty close month to month. I think it's just so ingrained in me, the memories, that it came back out. But it's fascinating, and I obviously am a writer. So back then I would write poems, and I decided I would be very vulnerable and also put some of my poems, the original paper, everything. I just photocopied it and put it in the book as well to make it a little bit more personal for the reader.
Nice.
Story 2 is the armed robbery and abduction, which that was our interview. Story 3, I went to a conference and realized I was being followed. And so that brought about the topic of situational awareness, listening to our gut, things like that. A lot of valuable lessons there. And the 4th story, I wanted to end on a very positive note with a message that I thought everyone could relate to. So it is set at a time where I went to Virginia Beach. And I ended up leaving that day realizing a couple of things. Is number one, my intention that day was to go and sit on the beach and write. But while that was my intention, that was not my purpose, as I encountered homeless people and ended up giving them blankets and food and everything else. And I walked away with this different type of feeling that I had never felt before. But I also realized in that moment that it took me overcoming my fear, because I was there alone, right? And having faith and knowing that, okay, through faith, I'm going to be able to fulfill my purpose. So those are some really valuable messages that I end my book with.
You packed a lot of stuff in this book.
I did, and it's easy read, and it's not too long because I wrote how I like to read.
All right. And it's called Why I Survived. And of course, we'll have a link to that. Now, your podcast, I Need Blue, you paused that briefly, but now it's back. How's it doing?
Oh, it's amazing. In that time, part of the reason it was paused is we moved. So now I'm in a new community, and this community has embraced it. They've embraced the message. They've supported it. A lot of my guests have come now from my local area. It's beautiful. And while I've been here now, I've been introduced to different resources who are now helping me take my message of I Need Blue, my book, the resources, and turn it into a business. So I was brought to this new community for a few reasons. So now I'm in a position where I can elevate I Need Blue.
Yeah, and I know that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. You said your new business, you've started a new company, and it's called The Healing in Sharing.
Mm-hmm.
What's involved with that?
Okay, great question. So yes, I've just got my LLC, all of that. The website is being designed. However, you can get a glimpse of it on my current podcast episode. But at the heart of The Healing and Sharing truly is about connection. It's where we come together to remind one another that we're not alone. We are grounded in faith, not fear, in strength, not shame. We carry a deep understanding that healing begins when we surrender. And surrender is a very scary word because it means we give up control.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But when we do that and we allow ourselves to be led, we come out of hiding and we choose to live our truth. And as we live our truth, we become light for others. So I like to say, in sharing our darkest chapters, we become the light for others.
And I know that's one thing that our podcasts have in common. We talk to people who are sharing what probably was their worst day. In some cases, I mean, we have happy stories too, but that's something that both of our shows do. How can people best find you now?
I'm going to send you to my podcast website. On there, you'll still be able to find the book. You'll also find my company, The Healing and Sharing. So that website is ineedblue.net. And blue is the color.
All right. Well, we'll have links to all that. And I think we're also going to have a picture of you in the episode notes with a new addition to your family. Is that right?
Yes. It's so exciting.
I know you love talking about all this other stuff, but you were just dying to tell people that you're a grandma now, right?
I am a grandma. Oh my gosh. Yes, it's so exciting. He is one now, and they're going to come visit for Thanksgiving. So love that. You know, I'm a mom of 2 boys, so now I have this amazing daughter-in-law. So that is great for me too, because I didn't have any girls. So I got someone to hang out with. And they have a boy, Giancarlo. So I get to still have that fun little boyness that I had growing up too. So yeah, it's great.
And you are glowing because of when you talk about that. Yeah. All right. Well, we're going to have that on there. And thanks for coming back on and keeping us up to date here. And I will see you in January at Podfest in Orlando.
Yes, I am very much looking forward to it. So we go way back from 2021. You know, yep, you were one of the first people I connected with. And I, even to this day, consider you one of my podcast mentors. So you've been invaluable to me. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. And as you know, and anyone knows, any podcaster, I'm happy to help whenever I can. So I'm happy that it turned out that you're doing a great show.
Thank you so much.
I see Jen every once in a while, either at a podcasting conference or even at a local podcaster meetup, because even though she's moved, she still lives here in Florida. She's always super nice and ready to help anyone she can. We got links to her podcast, her website, her book, and her email address if you'd like to contact her in the episode notes at whatwasthatlike.com/235.
Hi, Scott. I've been listening to your podcast, What Was That Like, since day one, and absolutely love it. I love the reading of To Build a Fire. When you got to the part about the dog, and he was talking about killing it, I almost stopped the recording, but I thought, I've never read anything by Jack London or heard anything. I'm going to pull through. And I was glad I did. I would enjoy hearing more stories read by you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
She's talking about one of the in-between episodes from back in September when I read the short story called To Build a Fire by Jack London. I say short story, but that episode was about an hour. I've heard from a lot of listeners who said they enjoyed it. So I have plans for another Jack London story episode later this month. Again, this will always be in between the regular What Was That Like episodes with guests, so stay tuned for another story. Okay, I want you to think back and try to remember, was there ever a time when you could have spoken up about something, but you didn't, and now you wish you had? It's an interesting question, because that's what we do in the podcast Facebook group. Every Tuesday, we ask an interesting or thought-provoking question, and the question this past Tuesday was, what was a time when you wish you had spoken up? And when you have over 9,300 people, there are always some interesting answers to those questions. Come on over and join us. whatwasthatlike.com/Facebook. Graphics for this episode were created by Bob Bretz. Full episode transcription was created by James Lai. And if you'd like to get a t-shirt with the podcast name and logo, you can get that and lots of other cool stuff at whatwasthatlike.com/merch. Okay, time for the listener story. You want to tell your 5 to 10 minute story here on the podcast? Just record it on your phone and send it to me, Scott at whatwasthatlike.com. This listener talks about getting diagnosed more than once. I'll be back here next week with all new episodes on Tuesday and Friday. Stay safe, and I'll see you then.
It all started when I was born and kept my parents up for weeks. They told me I had a case of colic, as some babies do. But the main thing that helped me relax wasn't the special formula. It was Elton John's Time Dancer song. As time went on, I began to have signs of autism, like stimming, rocking, flapping. But every doctor we saw would dismiss us, saying I was just quirky. I would eventually get diagnosed, but it wasn't until later in life, at 19 years old. Meanwhile, school was hard for me. At the school I grew up in, they will pull me and a few other kids who are going with the same problem into a different classroom to accommodate us better, mostly for math or reading. I did the best I could. I took Ritalin, I sat in front of the class, and even stayed inside from recess sometimes just to repeat a test. But the biggest problem nobody knew about is I had difficulty seeing. I had glasses, but they would last only maybe a year, maybe 6 months, and then my vision was just bad. We knew we always had needed glasses, but the problem is that I squinted a lot and got sensitive to too many lights. It just so happens we decided to move to another city, and my new eye doctor noticed I had cataracts. I would need surgery on both of my eyes. I was a little nervous about having someone cut open my eyeballs, but thank God for anesthesia. Let me tell you though, I stood at a patch of grass a few days later and married my new clear vision. It wasn't just a blur of green anymore. I could now see every single little piece of grass, laying on their own directions and against each other, below each other. It was beautiful. You never know you're going to take advantage on a daily basis. Just wow. Also, my grades got so much better in school now. I'm learning in a regular classroom. My surgeries didn't stop there, though. I started to get stomach problems in high school. At times, I couldn't eat more than saltines and apple juice. Okay, now that I think about it, it could have been my anxiety, too. I was afraid of throwing up the entire time. I was taken to a doctor who eventually took out my gallbladder. It was like night and day. I could eat McDonald's again like a teenager should. Simultaneously, in high school, my periods were just terrible. I mean, periods are always terrible, but mine's just would disappear for 6 months. Maybe a strawberry a week. Maybe so light I didn't need a pad. Maybe so heavy I was like, should I go to hospital? And yeah. Years later, I was working at Chick-fil-A and sat down in the middle of the floor because my head felt so lightheaded and dizzy. So they sent me home. I went to the doctor, and the only thing that they could decipher was my thyroid is out of range. That gland of mine was working way too hard, so they called it Graves' disease. The same doctor that removed my gallbladder ended up taking my 6th thyroid too, which is kind of cool to be honest. I'm still figuring out my health to this day, so I've been prescribed plenty of medications for various things. Sometimes it's hard to know when I'm really sick or not. Before I go to work, I'll get a upset stomach, diarrhea, whatever. And I would just have to go in anyway because it's most likely my IBS acting up again, not food poisoning or anything. Before I tell people I have 5 surgeries before and counting as a young adult, they just give me a look of pity. Instead, I just shrug of my shoulders and floating monthly pipe on. It's just a scratch. At the end of the day, it's how you react that matters most.